Today I'm here with Chris Pavlesic, Bitrefill's customer ambassador for Australia. Chris, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time to answer my questions. How are you today?
Hey Ricardo, thanks for having me, man. It's always good to chat with you, and more than happy to be invited to have an interview talking about Australia, the down under land, and all things Bitcoin. I'm doing well. We're moving into summer. It's getting really hot, but I'm lucky. I live very close to the beach. Or we're an island. We're surrounded by the beach, and the most people live on the coast. So it's a good time of year.
Awesome. Um, let's get started. My first question for you, Chris, is has the average Australian citizen heard of Bitcoin by now, or is it still like a fringe concept?
Yeah, good question. I think nowadays most people in Australia have at least heard of the term Bitcoin. They may not understand the meaning of Bitcoin, or they may not have invested in Bitcoin. But you've kind of, given how interconnected everyone is in society these days, it's pretty hard to have not heard of Bitcoin. Even more so now, we've recently hit all-time highs, so that obviously generates a lot of publicity, and mainstream media has started coming on board again. So I think most people in Australia have definitely heard of Bitcoin. It's not yet quite a dinner table conversation like it might be with, say, the weather, which everyone seems to default their conversation to. But yeah, Bitcoin's definitely getting more popular. We're seeing more people come into the space, more people get interested, family and friends are starting to talk about it here and there at barbecues and all those sort of events. So I'm getting a lot of people contact me saying, can you tell me about Bitcoin? What's going on? So yeah, it's definitely growing. It's I think it's no longer a fringe, cyberpunk computer software kind of movement. It's very much becoming legitimized, and we're seeing that through institutional investors and companies like PayPal entering the space. So good things ahead, I think.
How would you say that Australian Bitcoiners are typically acquiring their coins? Are they trading, or is there a mining industry in Australia? Are they earning their Bitcoin?
Yeah, look, I think the majority of people are probably just purely purchasing their cryptocurrencies from exchanges. We have a lot of them here in Australia, something like 250 registered cryptocurrency exchanges, which is quite a substantial amount, I think, for a population that only has about 25 million people. But yeah, I think the majority of people are definitely just purely purchasing it off these exchanges and brokerage services. There's probably a very small mining crypto community here in Australia. I've got some family friends that own a big solar farm in a capital city of Australia, and they've got a couple of Bitcoin miners, but more or less, it's not really competitive to mine at least Bitcoin here in Australia, because our electricity prices are fairly high, like considering sort of the global average. So it's very hard to compete with other parts of the world that maybe have things like geothermal or free energy. Like I know, China, for instance, has a lot of mining, because they just got it almost seems like an endless supply of energy. Whereas here in Australia, yeah, it's pretty costly. So if you can bring that cost down, I think, I'm not a miner myself, but I know a little bit about it. If you can bring your electricity costs down, like my family friend who has a solar farm, you can definitely make a few bucks here and there. But I think that's pretty niche. I think the majority of people are just purely purchasing their cryptocurrencies.
The last time we spoke, you mentioned that you were involved with a hardware wallet company there in Australia. Would you mind telling us about it?
Yeah, sure. It's kind of how I got my sort of professional start into cryptocurrency. I'd obviously heard about it, quite a while ago, back in sort of 2011, 2012. But, you know, back then it was just, I refer to it as this fake internet money. It really had no substance or meaning beyond that. It was just a lot of the early use case was, people experimenting. It wasn't really a place where people put their money to make money. I mean, maybe the smart, really, really smart early investors could see what was taking place. But back then I had no idea. I didn't even read the Bitcoin white paper. Sort of wasn't until about 2015 that I really looked at the Bitcoin white paper and said, wow, okay, this is still around, and it's actually got something more than just fake internet money. So it was just at that point, sort of 2016, me and 5 best friends that all sort of went to school together and grew up together. We were we were dabbling in the space. We were thinking about getting miners, and we were still very much novices. But one thing we did want was a cryptocurrency hardware wallet, which everybody sort of who's in the crypto space either owns one or has heard of one these days. But back then it was it was really new. Sort of the major retailers like Ledger and Trezor were only just getting started. It was very hard to come by these wallets, especially here in Australia. Like I said, we live on a crazy big island in the middle of nowhere. So whilst we're pretty good with technology, it takes a while for things to get here physically. So there were no retailers in the space. So we bought one and it came from Europe, and you had to pay in euros, and it took 2 or 3 weeks to get here. And it was just a really poor experience. And we just said to ourselves, wait a minute, if we want hardware wallets, we mustn't be the only ones, surely. So we said to ourselves, let's just buy a box of 10 and see what happens. So we did. We bought a box of 10 wallets from Ledger in France, and we started our business Coinstop. So you can check out our website, coinstop.io. We're Australia's first and largest reseller of cryptocurrency cold storage hardware wallets, and we've been doing it ever since. We absolutely love it. I mean, obviously, security is sort of one of the fundamental pieces of cryptocurrencies. For those who are going down their journey, you will learn it at some point that storing or having control of your own private key is probably one of the most fundamental aspects of cryptocurrencies. So hardware wallets, which is what we sell, kind of removes all the complexity and makes it quite easy and convenient to do that. And it obviously you don't have to trade off your security for the convenience of owning cryptocurrencies. So we've been going ever since. We're now nearly a company of 5 years old, which is quite a long time in the crypto space. We love what we do. It's just a lot of fun interacting with newcomers to the space, and it kind of feels like a duty to me to make sure that they get the right information about what's going on. Because back in 2011, when I was trying to explore it, I called it fake internet money. And it took me nearly 5 years to work out that it's actually more than that. So if I can sort of help people along the journey, make sure that they navigate the space safely, that's going to probably reflect on cryptocurrencies in a wider sense. People are less likely to get scammed. People are less likely to lose their money. They have better experiences, and then they share those experiences with their friends and families. And word of mouth is a very powerful tool. So if we can help one person navigate the space safely, then they'll go and tell their friends that, hey, this crypto thing isn't a scam. I did it, and I did it through these mechanisms. And that's kind of what we want to do. We think of ourselves more as educators as opposed to salesmen. I mean, yeah, we have an e-commerce business that sells wallets, but more or less, the core of our business is actually educating people about cryptocurrencies. And if we can do that, then we think naturally sales will happen, and we don't really push for them. These things sell themselves once you've realized that, hey, it's pretty important to store your cryptocurrencies, off exchanges, off insecure devices. Get yourself a hardware wallet. People just make that decision themselves. So it makes our job really easy and really fun, because we can just talk about crypto all day. We don't actually have to do any clever marketing or try to fool people about why these things, are so good because they've got X, Y, and Z features. We just walk people through the journey, tell them about the risks, and then they make their own decisions on what, well, obviously I need a hardware wallet. So yeah, it's been a fun journey. And I mean, that's opened up the door for me like crazy. Through Coinstop, we've met a whole bunch of people in the crypto community here in Australia. It's allowed me to put back my past career of working in manufacturing and heavy steel and hot, sweaty, factories and environments. And now I work from home. I have an office in Melbourne. I live next to the beach. I'm pretty happy where I am now, and I've got Coinstop to thank for a lot of that. And I hopefully we'll be around for another 5 or 10 years. I mean, that's the plan.
That's super inspiring. How easy is it to convert your Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency into Australian currency?
Oh, it's pretty easy nowadays. Yeah, like a lot, like I mentioned earlier, there's over 250 cryptocurrency exchanges here in Australia. They're all registered with a local governing body, which gives you some consumer protection, which is good. But they all more or less have integration with all of the legacy systems as well. So it's quite easy to tie your bank account to your cryptocurrency exchange. So when you want to cash out, you can, get it directly sent to your bank account. There are different intermediary services that are probably only known here in Australia, like BPay and Pay ID and a whole bunch of these different middleman services that make moving fiat currencies a little bit quicker. Probably not as quick as Bitcoin, but it's definitely more convenient when people want to move from crypto to fiat and back and forth. Actually wrote a blog on how to live on crypto in Australia recently, which has been posted on the Bitrefill website and is on my personal Medium as well. And I reckon we could probably link that blog piece in the show notes to this interview, so people can easily get to that as well. That outlines a couple of different options, including Bitrefill and a couple of others here located in Australia that allow you to cash in and out of crypto quite easily. So it's not one of those things where you've got to jump through 10, 15 different hoops and speak to an IT expert to get your crypto to work for your real life. It's pretty easy nowadays.
What's the Australian crypto community like? Would you say it's like a larger size community, or is it still pretty small?
Well, look, we're a pretty small country in the grand scheme of things. Only 25 odd million people. Some cities around the world have more than the entire population of Australia. But in saying that, we're really enthusiastic about technology. We're obviously a fairly modern type country. We take on technology and innovation quite rapidly. Like, for instance, Australia invented Wi-Fi, which I don't think a lot of people know that, but our one of our local research companies invented Wi-Fi, and now Wi-Fi is like, everyone's using Wi-Fi. Like, so, we're pretty good in that sense. So I think our adoption is fairly strong. I think, accurate numbers are hard to come by, but our local tax office, for instance, put out an estimation that between 1 or 2 million people have owned or do own cryptocurrencies here in Australia. I think those numbers are probably, a little bit out of date, maybe 12 or 24 months out of date. So you can probably say maybe that's increased. But even 2 million Aussies who have owned cryptocurrencies, we're talking nearly 10% of the population. So, in America, for instance, that would be 30 million people. I don't know the statistics in America. I don't know if 30 million people own cryptocurrencies, but if they don't, then you can see comparatively that Australia is doing reasonably well. 5 or 10% of the population owning cryptocurrencies, I think, is a good start. And, it only takes a little bit, the adoption curve of technology. Once you get that first 5 or 10%, the next 20, 30, 40 kind of just fall into place quite rapidly and easily. So I think we will see that probably take place maybe over this next bull run. That's always the thing that drives adoption, the price of Bitcoin, because, a lot of people come into the space or they hear about Bitcoin because it's a potential investment vehicle. So, any positive price action will, accelerate any of the adoption that's taking place. But look, we're a very buzzing community. I used to run weekly talk and trade events at a place called the Blockchain Center in Melbourne, which was, I think, the world's first dedicated blockchain knowledge community base and co-working space in the world. They've now replicated that to a whole bunch of different cities around the world, and I'm sure there's other type and other similar type communities around there. But we were getting anywhere between, at the start of a bull run, 30 people sitting around a couple of pizza boxes and some beers, to, at the height of the bull run, every Wednesday night having 300 plus people inside and outside the venue listening to me and a whole bunch of other people talk about all of the current affairs and the hot topics in crypto. So I think, like, we're already seeing that now. For instance, like, I've since relocated to the Sunshine Coast, which is a beautiful part of Australia, and I've obviously left behind a lot of that Melbourne crypto community. But even like last week, for instance, a local crypto enthusiast got in touch and said, "Hey, let's start a meetup." So we started a meetup, and look, there was only 5 of us there, but we already want to do it again this week. And I think that might end up being, 10 people. And that's how these communities form. They just start really small. And then they tell a few people and they go, yeah, I wouldn't mind coming along to that, and then, it doubles and then it doubles and then it doubles. And then before you know it, you're packing out big venues and there's conferences all around. So I think we're going to see the community grow again. There's obviously that foundational people like myself who obviously work every day in it, but the newcomers will start flowing in. And I think Australia's in a good spot. Like, we've got some really good projects coming out of Australia as well. Some top 50, top 100, top 200 coins, in a world where there's over 6,000 cryptos, to have some good representation from some legitimate Australian projects like Power Ledger, like the Loki project, like Thorchain. Like, these are all, well-established projects that are all developing their particular use cases of blockchain technology. Those are the sort of things that, Australians, and I think probably more or less nearly every country in the world, love to support their own. So we love the fact that we have these Aussie-made projects and the community will get behind them, whether they invest or whether they just purely promote or just, support in any way they can. Those are the kind of things that's going to help drive our community, I think.
You spoke earlier about the exchanges that Australian Bitcoiners are using to convert back and forth from fiat. But what about peer-to-peer exchanges? Are there any popular peer-to-peer exchanges in Australia?
I probably not as many as potentially other parts of the world. I can't really speak on other areas, but I think the vast majority of people are using centralized exchanges here in Australia. And then obviously some overseas exchanges, like obviously Binance is quite a large exchange, the most popular in the world. So there's a lot of customers that use Binance for trading, say, altcoins and stuff like that, because there's a wider range of options that you can invest in. But more or less, when people are moving in between Australian dollars and crypto back and forth, they're using local cryptocurrency exchanges. Like I said, there's over 250 of them. So there's definitely a lot of choice. There are like, the local Bitcoins and those type of websites that do get used by a small percentage of people. Like, I have a friend who's based up in Sydney, who's, I believe, Australia's largest peer-to-peer merchant on local Bitcoins and those type of websites. And so she does really well. She's got a very good reputation and has a good customer base and has been doing that solely full time for 5 or so years. So, if she's still doing what she's doing, then there must be people using her. So there's definitely some percentage of people using those peer-to-peer options. I think it's just a small percentage. It's not, doesn't make up a large portion of the crypto traders here in Australia. I think they still very much use centralized exchanges.
How's Australia's regulatory stance viewed by Bitcoiners in Australia? Do they view it as a good thing, or is it viewed as too restrictive?
Look, I think we've been for the most part pretty good. Like, the Australian government hasn't been too heavy-handed, and look, we've got a reputation for probably being fairly heavy-handed and putting a rule on everything. We love rules here in Australia, and sometimes that really drives me up the wall, because a lot of that stuff can really stifle innovation and slow down growth in particular industries. So whilst I'm fairly critical sometimes of the government and their regulations, I think for the most part they've been pretty welcoming and open-armed about cryptocurrencies and blockchain. Like, for instance, one of the early issues was that Bitcoin was being double taxed. So when you purchased Bitcoin, you were being taxed, and when you disposed of Bitcoin, you were being taxed, which was just horrible. I mean, I'm not familiar with any other type of asset that gets taxed like that. And obviously there was a lot of people in the space, a lot of early Bitcoiners trying to get that regulation changed, and we successfully did. It's been a few years now, but they made that change, and now you only get taxed upon the disposal of your cryptocurrencies. And I'm not a tax accountant, so definitely don't take any of my word as financial advice or taxation advice. Speak to your local accountant for your particular needs. But from a basic standpoint, Bitcoin is no longer being double taxed, which is fantastic. More recently, the federal government has actually invested some of the federal budget into exploring and researching blockchain technology, whilst it's only somewhere in the realm of $500,000 to $1 million, nothing groundbreaking. It is new technology after all. Like, you can't expect them to go, here's 300 million, let's work it out, baby steps. But at least that's a good signal that they're open to exploring the technology. And I think, once they dip their toes in, like all of us, they'll start throwing the whole leg in. And before you know it, you're in the deep end swimming up to your neck in crypto and blockchain. So I think at least that signal that they're willing to is a good thing. They've also since worked with a couple of industry leaders in the blockchain space here in Australia to develop something called the National Blockchain Roadmap. I've got a few friends and my lawyer has been involved with putting together that roadmap. So that's just, taking a look at what are some of the common problems here in Australia, whether it be logistics, agriculture, some of the well-established industries, and exploring, can we use blockchain technology to increase efficiencies or solve some of the inherent problems in those industries. So that's pretty interesting. I have scanned through the roadmap. It wasn't a super fun article to read, but it's there. And again, another one of those things that just kind of signals, hey, we're open to it. We're not banning it. We're not saying crypto's bad. No longer is the rhetoric that cryptocurrencies are just used for illegal activities. The government is saying we want to explore blockchain. So, it's becoming legitimized. And each of these things is further kind of pushing us in the right direction, I think. So more or less, Australia's regulatory stance is pretty good. I obviously can't speak for all of the individual Bitcoiners and what they think of that. We each have our individual opinions on what should be regulated, what shouldn't be regulated. But, at least the government isn't saying, they're not outlawing Bitcoin. You can use Bitcoin in Australia, you can invest in Bitcoin. That's at least a good start.
Yeah, I agree completely. What about Australian businesses? Can you spend Bitcoin or use any other crypto like Ethereum as a payment method at any Australian businesses?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been one of the challenging areas in crypto is, you've acquired it, you've potentially made some money on it. Now, what do I do with it? I can't really buy stuff with it. There are some merchants, obviously, like my business Coinstop accepts cryptocurrencies. It would be kind of weird if we didn't, because we're such a big supporter of it. But there are stores like us, online stores that these days it's pretty easy to get plugins to accept crypto. There are services like Coin Payments, BitPay, a whole host of different e-commerce plugins that you can just go bang, straight into the website. And it just pops up, just like the option to use your credit card or the option to use PayPal pops up in the cart. So that's helped at least the digital side of things. The brick and mortar stores, it's fairly limited. You'll find some cafes, some restaurants definitely accept Bitcoin, but it's pretty rare. Like, I wouldn't certainly go out not taking fiat, because expecting that you'd be able to go out on a night on the town and pay for everything in Bitcoin. And it's definitely not at that level yet. But that just comes with education and more people coming into the space and Bitcoin being further legitimized as a medium of exchange and a payment method. I think over time we will see that change. Like, for instance, there's this one town in Australia up here in Queensland where I live, a couple of hours north of where I live, called Agnes Waters. And I actually visited there a couple of months ago for the first time. It's a beautiful part of the world, like right on the ocean. You got the Great Barrier Reef. It's just absolutely gorgeous. But their big thing is they've actually got this big sign as you drive down the hill. It says Australia's first cryptocurrency town. And I actually know the gentleman behind this, and he put a bit of work in talking to all of the local merchants, the real estate agency, the news agency, the local bakery, and, pretty much all of the stores. It's only a small town, but there's a handful of stores there that all accept cryptocurrency payments. And there was a bit of news and fanfare around that. I think even Binance might have given him some support there too. So, places like that, whilst still very isolated, there are some places you can physically spend your cryptocurrencies. I know Brisbane Airport, for instance, which is, one of the major capital cities in Australia. A lot of the merchants at the actual airport accept cryptocurrency. So you could be, an international traveler or interstate traveler and pop in through Brisbane, and maybe you're just in the food court and you want to grab something to bite in between flights. A lot of the merchants there accept cryptocurrencies. I remember before I moved here, I did travel to Brisbane for a conference, and I flew out of Brisbane, and I thought, heck, I've heard about it. It's time for me to actually give it a go. This was a couple of years ago, but I bought Mexican for me and my partner, and I paid in Bitcoin, and it was cool. It was really fun. It was actually cool to see it work, and to be able to. The whole time I was eating that burrito, I was like, I paid for this in Bitcoin. This is awesome. Like, whilst it's still rare, it's cool. And I think it's definitely going to get more popular over time as those integrations like coin payments and stuff sort of happen in the real world. So, your local shoe store or your local supermarket can accept it. There are obviously ways to circumvent that currently. And the blog piece that I wrote, which is going to be shared, it sort of touches on that. Like, obviously Bitrefill is one really easy way to cash out and to actually spend your crypto. I don't know the exact number, but there's something probably like 50 or close to 100 merchants here in Australia that Bitrefill support. And I hear that there might be more. Stay tuned to news on that. But you could go down to a place like Coles, which is one of our big supermarket chains, and you can buy a Bitrefill gift card or a gift card for Coles through Bitrefill and actually use Bitcoin to buy your groceries. So there are ways if you're patient and willing to learn and sort of jump through the minor inconveniences. But I think Bitrefill is a fantastic service, and it really doesn't provide. It doesn't have that much friction, to be honest. I think it's probably just as quick, if not even easier, than actually walking down to the supermarket and them having like the facility themselves to accept crypto payments. Gift cards are a very much established industry, so there's nothing confusing there from the the teller's perspective. If you walked up with a QR code and said, "Can I pay for my Bitcoin?" they might be like, "Oh, what's going on here? I've never heard of crypto." Whereas Bitrefill kind of removes all that. We deal with the complexities and make it easy for the consumer and for the retailer to accept crypto, even if they don't know they're doing it. So there are a number of ways like that as well. And the article highlights a couple of options as well beyond just Bitrefill.
That actually leads me perfectly into my next question. What would you say are the most useful Bitrefill gift cards for Bitcoiners located in Australia?
Yeah, good question. Well, look, to be honest, I think Bitrefill is still fairly not known here in Australia. Like, before I joined the team as the Australian ambassador, I had not heard of it. And I've been in crypto for, good part of 6-7 years. And like I said, Australia's, whilst pretty excited about crypto, it's a pretty small community. I know pretty much everyone and anything that's going on in crypto, bar a handful of people who are maybe still getting started or haven't really gotten themselves out there publicly. For me to not have heard Bitrefill, I was quite surprised, to be honest. And when I came across it, I was like, wow, this is awesome, because I was looking for something like this, because like I mentioned, a lot of retailers don't accept crypto natively. And even using some of these other options like PayBTC or Living Room of Satoshi, you still can't get through to those retailers. Like JB Hi-Fi is a really good example. So they're probably one of, if not the biggest electronic and home appliance retailer here in Australia. They work both online, and they have physical stores all around Australia. They're massive. Everybody knows them here in Australia. It's pretty much the go-to place if you're looking to buy a TV, a video game, an iPhone, anything in between. That's where you usually go. They've got great prices. They've always got good stock availability. So, my partner was wanting to buy these exact headphones, which is the Bose Quiet Comfort headphones. And I said, all right, well, let's see if we can buy them using Bitcoin. And I looked online everywhere. Like, obviously went to JB Hi-Fi initially. They don't accept Bitcoin natively. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll use something like PayBTC or Living Room of Satoshi, these services where you can send them Bitcoin, then they send the Australian dollars to the company. They only do it through bank transfers. JB Hi-Fi don't accept bank transfers. So I'm like, all right, well, maybe I can find another retailer online that sells Bose headphones that I can find a way to give them my Bitcoin. I spent, like, honestly 3 weeks trying to find someone that would take my Bitcoin to buy these headphones, and I couldn't find anyone. I was like, oh, crazy. Like, why is it like this? And then I heard of Bitrefill, and JB Hi-Fi is one of the gift cards you can purchase. And I thought, oh my God, this whole time it was here in front of me. I just had no idea. So I think, JB Hi-Fi is probably going to be one of the most popular gift cards, and we've obviously got our internal statistics which show some of the usage, and JB Hi-Fi is one of the most popular gift cards. Another is like simply just like Coles, which is your supermarket. So people are purchasing their weekly groceries through Bitrefill, which is obviously super convenient because your groceries are pretty expensive, especially when you're feeding a family. If you've got kids and you've got lots of people living in the home, you can easily spend well over $100, $200 a week on groceries. So I think it's pretty awesome if you can potentially invest into Bitcoin and use some of that Bitcoin to buy your groceries, which is reducing the sort of stress on your your fiat holdings. I think that's a really cool way to cash out Bitcoin. Those sort of just everyday purchases, I think, are becoming normal, and people are using Bitrefill as a gateway to get into that. I think Coles and JB is definitely like the top two from what I've seen. But look, there's places like Bunnings. So if you're not familiar with Bunnings, that's like a home improvement DIY superstore. Anything you need to fix around the home or in the garden, Bunnings is the place to go. So Bunnings is another place that you can purchase gift cards through Bitrefill. So if you're looking to renovate your home or do any handiwork on the car or anything like that, you can go there. The article that I wrote actually gives a bunch of examples in a few different sort of areas. Like for instance, petrol, you can fill up your car using Bitrefill through Caltex, which is I think the biggest petrol station chain here in Australia. They have something like over 1,300 different places where you can purchase petrol around Australia. So you could literally be traveling around Australia, which a lot of people do. They jump in a van and travel around Australia and look at the beautiful country. You could be filling your fuel through Bitrefill. So look, there's a whole host of ways. I just recommend jumping on the website, having a look at it's all categorized. So if you're doing retail shopping, if you're doing clothing, if you're doing anything, there's different categories that you can search through and look at all the options available. And that's probably just the best way to figure out, like, what am I often purchasing and what can I maybe substitute through Bitrefill?
My last question, well, it's actually a two-part question, but would you say it's possible to live on crypto in Australia? And do you think that there are any advantages for Australians to do so?
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible to live on crypto in Australia, and have a look at the article. That'll definitely walk you through some of the ways that you can. But through the interview, we've spoken about all of the different cryptocurrency exchanges, all of the different sort of merchants and gateways that you can use for crypto. Whilst admittedly, it's not as easy as going down to your local corner shop and buying some bread or some milk with crypto. It's not quite at that point yet, so you're probably going to need your dollars for that. But if you plan it and if you sort of educate yourself well enough, you can actually make it fairly easy to live on crypto here in Australia. There are plenty of people doing it. So I think the only excuse these days is just not having the knowledge, and that's all available out there. You just have to take the time to research it. I think in terms of advantages, well, look, at the end of the day, investing in crypto to be rich on paper kind of doesn't really mean anything. I mean, it's all well and good to own 50 Bitcoin and you can tell people, you may not want to tell people this, but you can say, I'm a millionaire because I have 50 Bitcoin or whatever. At the end of the day, you're going to want that Bitcoin to do something for you, whether it's purchase a property, buy a car or a Lambo, as lots of people in the crypto space always talk about, without actually sort of cashing out and doing something useful with your Bitcoin. It's just digits on a screen. So, the advantage is that you can remove yourself from the traditional system. If perhaps for a lot of people, it's difficult to participate. We're pretty lucky here in Australia. Getting banked is reasonably easy. Whilst, there are definitely rules around opening up a bank account, more or less the people here in Australia are, eligible, but I know in other parts of the world, it's not that easy. So crypto is that easy. You can literally download an application on your smartphone in a matter of 30 seconds and voila, you're part of the crypto economy instantly, and you can trade all around the world. So whilst, the Australian dollar works for most people, they go down to the supermarket, they tap their card and they pay for their food. Crypto has no borders. So remitting money overseas, I know that's a big part of what a lot of Australians do, because like myself, I didn't come from Australia. My heritage comes from Europe. So I have a lot of family back in Europe, and I know, my father and all of my family and cousins and all that sort of stuff, they still have family back overseas in Europe. So remitting money through the traditional system can be quite painfully slow and expensive. So using something like crypto sort of is another way to make that process a little bit smoother. Bitcoin can be as good as 10 minutes in terms of confirmation time. So I don't know of any service that can send money to the other part of the world in a matter of minutes other than Bitcoin and crypto. So it definitely has its uses. There are still plenty of ways that traditional fiat are better than crypto, which I've mentioned. The corner store not accepting Bitcoin, buying your loaf of bread kind of doesn't make sense using your Bitcoin for that at the moment, but that might change. Who knows? Like it's all a journey. I always say to people, credit cards took something like 60 years to be adopted to the point where it's just common. Like no one really questions why we have credit cards and debit cards. They're just very much in everybody's wallet, and it's completely normal. But that took 60 years to adopt. The guy that first said it, everyone said, "You're crazy, man. Like, what are you talking about? We got this physical cash," and I hand it to people. It just takes time. My loose estimates are that crypto is probably going to take somewhere between, I don't know, 25 and 30 years to get to that point where credit cards are now, maybe. So, we're about 10 or 11 years in that journey. So, that's why I always say to people, it's never too late to get on board and join the crypto community. It's still early days, still very, very early days. And you can be a part of that journey, and you can help shape what that looks like, because in the end, consumers drive change. And if, it's just the same people saying the same thing, then that's what we'll always have. But we do need new users coming into crypto to help say, hey, well, this is a problem for me and my wave of users. And then that's what drives the change to address that problem. So, jump on board, ask questions, talk to your friends and family. Feel free to reach out to me. If the crypto community is very welcoming. Like, I know some people look at it as like really scary and overwhelming. It is, because there's a lot of new stuff going on. But the good part of it is everyone is really open to helping others, because we remember what it was like when it was overwhelming and scary for us. And for a lot of us, we didn't have that help just because it didn't exist. We actually just had to figure it out for ourselves. But a lot of that help does exist now. There are so many great communities. There are so many great thought leaders and influencers that can help people along the journey, which will limit the mistakes, limit the losses, clear the confusion. So yeah, don't be afraid. Don't think that you're an idiot or you're silly for asking a question, because we all asked the exact same questions when we started, and it was a lot harder to find the answers. So, I think that's probably where I would leave it with anyone who's, maybe at the start of their journey. Don't be scared.
Thank you very much, Chris, for taking the time to answer my questions. I really appreciate it.
No worries, Ricardo. It was awesome. I always love talking Bitcoin and crypto. It's like it's my job there nowadays. So this is fun. I absolutely love talking to you. So thanks for having me on. I really appreciate you putting together those questions. A great bunch of questions. So if anyone wants to follow up, you know where to find us, either through Bitrefill or through social links. We're everywhere on crypto and online. So feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I'll be sure to include your article also in the description.